For 12 straight years, Pete had obeyed every command without fail. But now, the old mule stood firm, immovable, like a beast sculpted from stubborn rock blocking the cellar entrance, with a silent defiance that burned behind his dark, glassy eyes. No coaxing, no bribes, not even a bucket of his favorite oats tempted him. Silas Whitmore wiped his brow, sweat mixing with dust as he stared at the weathered old door Pete so fiercely guarded. That cellar had never mattered until now. 3 weeks had passed since Silas buried his father, and ever since, Pete hadn't left that spot. He didn't eat much, barely slept, just stood sentry like a soldier assigned to something no one could explain. Silas remembered that green-painted cellar door from his childhood, now chipped and faded with time, but he'd never been allowed near it. Just old junk and poison, his father would mutter any time young Silas asked. But that never explained the 3 thick iron locks that secured it. As Silas stepped forward, his boots crunching on sun-bleached grass, Pete let out a low, unfamiliar growl. It wasn't anger, it was warning. Pete had never growled before. Silas raised a hand slowly. "Easy, buddy," he whispered, trying to reassure him. "It's just me." But Pete only pressed himself closer to the door, as if determined to block any access to whatever lay beneath it. His flared nostrils and wide, weary eyes didn't show fear of Silas but fear for him. The ranch hands had started to whisper. Miguel, who'd worked here nearly as long as Pete had stood guard, muttered prayers under his breath whenever he passed the barn. Young Tommy wouldn't go near it after sundown, and Sarah, who used to bring lunch all the way to the porch, now left meals at the gate. Without saying a word, Silas tried once more, gripping Pete's halter and pulling hard. The animal didn't move. Instead, he turned and looked right into Silas's eyes, and what Silas saw froze him to the core. Pete wasn't being stubborn. He was standing between Silas and something dangerous. And then, just as the sun dropped low and the sky began to bleed orange, a sound came from behind that cellar door, so faint Silas almost thought he'd imagined it. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the other side of the door. Silas's breath caught in his throat. He stepped closer, pressing his ear to the rough, splintering wood. Pete shifted beside him, tense but unmoving. Then silence, until the knock came again. 5 fast raps, 3 slow ones. Then 5 more, not random. A message. Someone down there knew he was listening. His heart thudded painfully in his chest as he backed away and bolted toward the house. He tore through drawers in the study, papers flying. In the back of one, behind an old photo of his mother, he found a small brass key, strangely warm, as if someone had just held it. He ran back to the cellar. Pete was pacing now, agitated in a way Silas had never seen. His eyes wide, steps restless, hooves digging at the ground. Silas held up the key. Pete froze. Then dashed slowly, cautiously. The mule stepped aside, not abandoning the door completely, just enough to let Silas reach the locks. In Pete's eyes was a message as clear as if spoken aloud. "Be careful." The first lock opened easily. The second took some force, groaning as it gave way. As Silas reached for the third, Pete made a haunting, low moan, an almost human sound, deep and broken, like grief wrapped in warning. The brass key slid into the final lock. He turned it. The lock clunked open, echoing in the heavy silence. Then he heard it. Footsteps, dragging and unsteady, like someone climbing worn wooden stairs from below. They stopped at the top, just behind the door. Breathing followed, slow, ragged, definitely human. Hand shaking. Silas reached for the handle. Pete didn't move, only watched, eyes shining with dread and devotion. He pulled the door open. It groaned on rusted hinges. Stairs led down into darkness, but at the top of them, just before the shadows took over, stood a figure that brought Silas's world crashing down. A woman, her face unchanged from the one in the faded photograph that sat by his bed for years. His mother. Ruth Whitmore. The same kind eyes, the same weathered hands, even the same braid trailing down her back. Only now, her skin was pale, her features thin, like someone who hadn't felt sunlight in decades. "Hello, Silas," she said, her voice soft and exactly as he remembered. "I knew you'd find me one day." And all Silas could do was stare, lost between the reality he thought he knew and the one that had just stepped out from the dark. Asterisk asterisk, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The woman in front of him, hair streaked with gray, eyes tired but warm, was unmistakably his mother. The same woman he'd mourned as a boy, buried with trembling hands. "Mama," Silas whispered, the word falling from his lips like a broken plea. Ruth's smile was bittersweet, carved from years of silence and sorrow. "He told you I died, didn't he?" "Told everyone. But I've been here, Silas, right under your feet this whole time." Pete, his father's old dog, ambled forward and nudged her skirt with a familiarity that spoke of countless past visits. She reached down, fingers brushing behind his ears with tenderness that hadn't faded. "He's been my only companion all these years," she said softly. "Your father brought him down every week, with food, books, letters about you. But he made me swear, even that I'd never try to contact you, never let you know." Silas's throat was tight, the words catching before they could fully form. "Why?" he managed. "Why would he lie to me? Why would he let me believe you were dead?" Tears swam in Ruth's eyes, but she blinked them away. "Because I took a life, Silas, and not just anyone's. I killed the sheriff's brother, in self-defense, but we both knew nobody would believe me. Your father had two choices: let them hang me, or make the world believe I was dead." Silas staggered back like the truth had weight. Everything he thought he knew: his family, his father's stern nature, the pain he'd carried growing up without a mother, was built on a lie. He held a funeral. Ruth went on, buried in empty casket, and while the town saw a grieving widower, he was building this place, not just a cellar, a home, for me, for us. Only now did Silas truly take in the space around him: a bed tucked into the corner, a tiny kitchen, shelves crammed with books, a rocking chair set before a small hearth. "He gave me a life down here," she whispered. "Every evening, he came to sit with me like clockwork. Until 3 weeks ago, when Pete stopped coming, I knew he was gone." Pete whined and sat beside Ruth like a faithful guard, his presence suddenly more than that of a loyal pet. It was as if he'd been waiting for Silas to be ready. But amid the awe and grief, Silas spotted something that made his stomach drop. A pile of wanted posters lay on the table behind her, new ones. The top poster bore a sketch that mirrored Ruth's face almost exactly. His hands trembled as he picked it up. The bounty was listed at $5,000. Enough money to tempt half the country. Ruth Whitmore, wanted for murder, believed to be hiding in Western territories, armed and extremely dangerous. "They never stopped searching," Ruth said quietly, watching his expression darken. "The sheriff's family has wealth, power, and a grudge that never died. They've kept the bounty alive all this time." Silas studied her face again. This wasn't some cold-blooded killer. This was the woman who'd kissed scraped knees and sang lullabies under the stars. "Tell me what happened," he said. Ruth exhaled slowly and sank into her rocking chair, Pete pressing closer. "Caleb Hawkins. He'd been harassing women for months," she began, but no one said a word. "Everyone feared his brother, the sheriff. That night, he followed me into the general store. I was alone." Her voice dropped. "He said vile things, ripped my dress, cornered me. I tried to get away, but he shoved me hard. I saw a carving knife on the counter. When he pressed himself against me again, I reached for it." A long pause. It happened fast. Too fast. One moment he was on me, the next, he was on the floor, bleeding. I ran straight home. Told your father everything. He saw the torn dress, the bruises, and he understood. Rage began to coil inside Silas, not toward his mother, but the world that would have condemned her for surviving. That same night, Ruth said, "Your father rode into town and found Caleb's body. But by then, Caleb's friends were already spreading lies. Said I lured him, that I attacked him unprovoked. Said he was just trying to help me." She looked up, eyes shining with old grief. "Your father came home and said the only way to protect me was for Ruth Whitmore to disappear. Forever." Silas sat in stunned silence, the weight of the past pressing down on him. But then, something new stirred. "If these posters are new," he said slowly, "then someone must know you're still alive." Ruth nodded. 3 days before your father passed, a man came asking questions. Said he was a merchant, but your father recognized him. Caleb's nephew, all grown up, still chasing vengeance. Pete lifted his head then. Ears perked above them. The faint sound of horses drifted through the floorboards. Ruth went pale. "They've come," she said. "They've found me." And now everything rested on Silas. Would he run? Try to smuggle his mother to safety, knowing it might expose her to the world forever? Or would he stay and make a stand, face the men who had hunted her for nearly 30 years? That decision would shape the rest of their lives. What would you do? Sunrise bathed the horizon in gold as Silas moved swiftly through the dim cellar, helping his mother extinguish the last of the oil lamps that lit her hidden home overhead. Heavy footsteps stomped across the porch above them, followed by a loud crash. The front door forced open with a boot. "Ruth Whitmore," came a deep, commanding voice. "We know you're down there. Come out quiet, and we won't torch this whole place." Pete, the burro, huddled beside Ruth, pressing against her legs, trembling but eerily silent. There was something in his stillness and awareness that seemed to go beyond mere animal instinct. Silas could hear them above, tearing through the house, shattering dishes, toppling furniture. At least 3 men, maybe more, all with heavy boots and clinking spurs, weapons ready. 27 years we've hunted you." The voice bellowed again. "But we found his journal before he died. We know where he really went at night. The barn. That was your hiding place." Ruth's face twisted in anguish. "Your father kept records," she whispered. "I begged him not to, but he said someone needed to know the truth, in case he didn't survive." The sound of the men outside grew sharper. They were circling the house now. Lantern light flickered through the cracks of the cellar windows, casting long, writhing shadows along the walls. "We saw the burro," another voice called out, younger, but full of cruelty. "That filthy beast led us right to you. We've been watching, waiting for that door to open." Silas felt sick. Pete hadn't just been guarding his mother, he'd been trying to keep others out, sensing the danger before any of them did. "There, look at these locks," said the first voice. "Closer now. Fresh scratches. She's inside. Stand back, boys." A loud click echoed through the night, the sound of a rifle being readied. Ruth gripped her son's arm. "There's another exit," she said urgently. "Your father dug a tunnel leading to the creek bed. But Silas, if they catch me, they'll hang me before sunrise. No questions. No mercy. The Hawkins men don't care for trials." Footsteps drew near. Someone examined the cellar door. "These locks are still warm. She opened them not long ago." Silas didn't hesitate. He grabbed Ruth's hand and Pete's halter, guiding them toward the back of the cellar. Behind a false wall was a narrow crawl space, just as Ruth had said. "Go," he told her softly. "I'll hold them off." But Ruth refused, gripping his arm. "I didn't survive this long to lose you now." Suddenly, the cellar door shattered inward. Wood flying, light spilling into the space. 3 armed men stepped in, rifles raised. The one in front was tall, gaunt, with bitter eyes that had been hardened by decades of hate. Well, he said, lowering his weapon slightly. "Ruth Whitmore, just like your wanted poster." Before anyone could react, Pete exploded forward. With a rage that shook the room, the burro barreled into the leader, knocking him flat, sending his rifle flying and his lantern crashing to the floor. In the chaos, shouting men, a braying burro, overturned crates. Neither Silas nor Ruth noticed the 4th man slipping in. From the tunnel behind them, a hand suddenly clamped over Ruth's mouth, but it was gentle. A voice whispered, soft and familiar, "Easy, Ruth, it's me, Doc Henley." She froze. Doc Samuel Henley, the town doctor from all those years ago. He was the one who'd seen her bruises, who'd helped fake the death certificate when Thomas Whitmore staged her funeral. "I've been watching your land for weeks," he said, keeping his voice low. Knew something was wrong when Pete started acting strange. "Your father made me promise if anything ever happened to him, I'd protect you." Back in the cellar, the 3 bounty hunters were still trying to subdue Pete, who fought like a creature possessed, his fury shaking the earth. "Come on," Doc urged, pulling Silas and Ruth toward the tunnel. "I've got horses by the creek." They crawled through the tight passage. Behind them, Pete's roars of defiance continued, until they didn't. A final, painful bray echoed through the tunnel, then a gunshot. Laughter followed. "Cruel, Triumphant. That's what happens to beasts that guard murderers, one of the men sneered. Ruth stopped cold. Tears streamed down her cheeks. They killed him. Pete's dead. We have to move, Doc said gently but firmly. Pete gave his life for you. Don't waste it. They burst out of the tunnel near the creek, where 3 saddled horses stood waiting. But before they could ride far, the sound of hooves surrounded them. More men, many more closing in from both sides. They can't be far, came the voice of the bounty leader. 5 grand says we stop them before the county line. Doc led them into the shallow creek, using the water to soften the sound of the horses' steps. But even in the moonlight, they could see the riders flanking both banks, sweeping every rock and tree for signs of movement. There's an old shaft about 2 miles up, Doc whispered. Your father and I used to dig for silver there. We can hide until they give up. They pushed forward, but suddenly Ruth yanked the reins and stopped. Her voice was firm, resolute. No more hiding, she said. I won't spend the rest of my life running. I won't crawl into another hole just to wait for the next time they come. Good folks are dying while I stay safe, she said, turning her horse toward the trail they'd come from. They murdered Pete. They burned your father's house down, Silas. And they're not going to stop until someone stands in their way. Mama, what are you saying? Silas asked. Ruth's eyes gleamed with a resolve Silas had never seen in her. I'm saying I'm done hiding. It's time Ruth Whitmore stopped being the hunted. Before anyone could stop her, she kicked her heels into the horse's side and charged back in the direction of danger. Gunshots soon shattered the quiet night behind her, echoing over the hills of the ranch. Silas and Doc Henley chased after her, but Ruth had a head start and nearly 3 decades of fury driving her forward. She rode with the fire of someone who had already made peace with death, deciding that if she was going to die, she'd die. Standing in the moonlight, the bounty hunters spotted her coming. Her silver hair trailed behind like a war flag. She didn't look like a woman anymore. She looked like a ghost risen from the grave. They tried to bury her and there she is, the leader shouted. Take her alive if you can, dead if you have to. But Ruth wasn't charging recklessly. As she neared the ranch house, she swerved toward the barn where her husband had once kept his hunting rifles. The same barn where Pete had made his final stand to protect her. Gunfire cracked through the night as she jumped from her horse and dashed inside. Wood exploded around her, glass shattered. But Ruth moved like someone who'd already let go of fear. She found what she was looking for, Thomas's old rifle, the same one he'd taught her to shoot with when they were young, before life got heavy. The one she used to protect their animals from wolves and hunt game for dinner. The men outside shouted for her to surrender, but Ruth had waited 27 years for this. She'd imagined this moment in her dreams and nightmares. You want Ruth Whitmore, she yelled. Then come and get her. The leader was the first through the door, full of confidence and arrogance. But he underestimated her. Ruth knew every crack and corner of that barn. She'd spent half her life there. Her first shot hit him in the shoulder, spinning him back and knocking his weapon to the floor. The second shattered the lantern in his hand, plunging everything into darkness. She's just one woman, someone yelled from outside. Rush her, 2 men charged in. But this time, Ruth wasn't alone. Silas and Doc Henley had arrived, guns ready. What followed was quick and violent, a chaos of smoke, blood, and shouting. Rage, grief, and years of silence poured out in every shot fired. When the air finally stilled, 3 bounty hunters lay dead in the dirt, but the price had been steep. Doc Henley was leaning against the barn wall, his shirt soaked in blood. He'd taken a bullet meant for Ruth. Ruth knelt beside him, hands shaking as she pressed against the wound. He smiled through the pain. Always figured I'd go out helping someone. Thought it'd be delivering a baby, not dodging bullets. You're not going anywhere, she said, fierce and terrified. His voice grew weaker. In my medical bag, there's a letter. Wrote it years ago, just in case. It tells the truth about what Caleb Hawkins did to you. What I saw, what I treated, got witnesses, signatures, all of it. Silas found the letter, yellowed and sealed with time. This could clear your name, Mama. Doc gave a faint nod. Sheriff Hawkins is long dead. His replacement, he's good. Honest, he'll listen. By the time the sun rose over the ranch, its warm colors spreading across the land like a promise, Ruth held in her hands more than just a letter. She held the hope of justice. But as she looked down at Doc's pale face, she knew the truth. This letter would mean nothing if the man who wrote it didn't survive. Doc Henley did survive. Ruth's hands had stopped the bleeding, and Silas had ridden hard to town. Returning with help just in time, Doc's life was saved. And with him, the truth. The new sheriff, William Crawford, proved to be exactly the kind of man Doc had described, just, fair, and unmoved by old vendettas. When he read Doc's account of Ruth's injuries, when he saw the witness statements, and learned about Caleb Hawkins's long history of abuse, he knew Ruth had been telling the truth all along. The bounty hunters who had died weren't acting under any legal authority. Their leader carried no warrants, only papers tying them to Caleb Hawkins by blood. Nephews, cousins, men raised on hatred, not justice. Within days, all charges against Ruth Whitmore were dropped. The woman the world thought had died 27 years earlier was now legally alive again. She could walk under the sun without fear. But freedom came heavy. Pete was laid to rest beside the barn he'd died defending. His grave was simple, a stone that read, "Loyal to the end." Every morning, Ruth visited it with fresh oats. She knew he'd never eat them again, but it brought her peace. Doc Henley made a full recovery. The bullet left a scar on his chest, but he wore it proudly. Some scars tell the best stories, he told Ruth, and this one tells the story of justice coming home. Silas had his own struggle. Anger at his father burned inside him, but eventually it gave way to understanding. Thomas Whitmore had been faced with an impossible choice: to sacrifice his own peace, to protect the woman he loved, and he did it. Without hesitation, Silas came to see that love often means choosing pain to spare someone else's. Ruth chose to remain at the ranch. After all those years hidden away underground, she couldn't get enough of the sun, of the wind, of simply walking wherever she wanted. She converted the hidden cellar into what Thomas had always pretended. It was a place to store vegetables and preserves. At first, the town was unsure how to react to Ruth's return. But as the truth spread, and as the sheriff confirmed her innocence, hearts began to soften. The women, especially, understood what she had been through. In a world where powerful men rarely faced justice, Ruth's story was painfully familiar. She never married again, but she lived 30 more years on that land, walking freely across the ranch that had once been her prison. Silas brought his children to visit, and Ruth told them stories about their grandfather's quiet bravery, about a doctor who stood by her side, and about a stubborn burro named Pete who had once blocked a door to save her life. When Ruth passed away in her sleep at the age of 84, the entire town came to say goodbye. She was buried beside Thomas, with Pete's grave close enough for her to see. If this story moved you, there's another tale waiting for you, one filled with truths even deeper than this one's you won't forget long after the last word is spoken.